What did the "weird kid at school" do to make them weird? Tried to shoot up the school. After his year of juvie, they let him come back, even though he showed up with a knife and a gun one time. He had a literal death list of people he wanted to kill. Long story short, he got suspended. Got yelled at by the teacher and sent to the corner of the room, so he shit his pants. Didn't shower. Would do a weird sprint walk when going through the hallways, pushing people out of the way. He would grab onto the wall as he was going around corners to sort of propel him around the corner or something. He did this all while carrying a trombone case, which would always end up hitting someone. After lunch break was over, he held the door open for everyone coming back inside the school. We all thought he was just trying to be nice and polite, but he said he was opening the doors of hell to you sheep. Weird and antisocial behavior, but ultimately rates 3/10 on the disturbing scale. Cut off pieces of his hair and sprinkled them on someone else's head while lice was going around, might I add. He would eat live ants. We're all happily standing in a line somewhere. He would find an ant, get it to crawl on his finger, then pass it off to crawl on his tongue, then eat it. Here's a couple. This one kid, I think his name was like Elijah or something. He would grow his fingernails really long and file them into claws. He'd done the same to his teeth somehow. He'd go around trying to pick fights with people. Nobody ever really responded. Then, our resident cat girl, she'd hiss at people and try to scratch them. And she was obsessive about this purse she carried around, which she'd often swing at people either randomly or if they made a comment about her hissing. I remember seeing her fighting with 2 teachers because they tried to confiscate the purse. Finally, cheese dick. A bunch of us were at a dude's birthday party, and after a few hours, we noticed we can't find this dude Brandon. We figured he got too drunk and stumbled off somewhere to pass out, but it became a thing. We searched the whole house and couldn't find him. Searched around the outside of the house. Nope. We were freaking out in the way you do when something goes wrong at an underage drinking party. Like, oh god, he got hit by a car or something, and we're all going to jail. Finally, we decided to look in the woods behind the house, and that's where we found Brandon, sitting against a tree and jacking off using a can of Easy Cheese as lube. He was forever known as Cheese Dick from then on. In middle school there was this kid who was intentionally gross burping, passing gas, snot rockets, spitting, etc. Everyone universally hated him, teachers included, until one day he really topped it all. One morning before homeroom he pooped his pants in the middle of the hall, shook it down his pant leg, then proceeded to kick it down the hall under some lockers. It's been 20 years, and I still remember how much we all hated that shit kicker. Wore black clothing. Said that's intense a lot. Did a ton of drugs, usually during school hours. He blacked out in one of the bathrooms once on some ground up pills. When woken, said, "That's sentience." Kinda funny at the time, but these days I wonder what was wrong with his home life to be doing that shit in grade 10. Didn't last all the way through high school. Either dropped out or transferred. Don't know what happened with him since. Also, I do say that intense to intense situations now because of him. So there's that. She was developmentally/emotionally challenged, possibly autistic, very smart, and in a regular, not special needs, classroom. She had a pencil she talked to named Sally. This was 42 years ago. Yes, I'm old. I was always kind to her and sat with her at lunch. Claimed to be half cat, half witch. This one obviously had some severe mental health issues. This was back in the late 80s/early 90s. Chris was small, backslash maybe 5 feet tall in high school, and probably 110 pounds soaking wet. Yet for some reason, he seemed to have this fetish for getting his ass kicked by the biggest person he could possibly find. He would easily go up to people and start acting like the new tough guy on the block to people who were a foot taller than him, outweighed him by 100 pounds, and could squash him in seconds without even trying. And if acting like a tough guy didn't work, he'd start making threats. And if that didn't work, He'd just resort to throwing punches until the bigger guy had no choice but to fight back. This always resulted in Chris getting beaten to a pulp. Yet a few days or a week later, he'd find someone else, start some beef with them, and get his ass kicked again. School security often took their sweet time breaking up fights he was in because they got sick of him starting shit and felt that the beatings he was getting were well deserved. And they were. And the threats got worse over time. It wasn't just empty threats of "I'll beat the shit out of you" that he couldn't back up. Eventually, the threats escalated to him doing things to their girlfriends, family members, etc. His most notorious was when he walked up to one student who was well over 6 feet tall and threatened to rape his sister. By the time security showed up, the other guy had him against the wall by his throat and was mercilessly beating him. The police had to get involved, not only because of the severity of the beating, but the threats the kid was making. A few years after I graduated high school, he was put away for attempting to rape a 5-year-old girl. My understanding is that he did not survive very long in prison. Nobody knew what his malfunction was, but he obviously had some serious issues. A lot of things. He bragged about his high score on a narcissism test, knew an absurd amount of strange and wonderful facts about the world, and gave off a vibe that made people think he hated them, even though he didn't. The best thing was when he ran for class president and gave people potatoes and said to vote for him. He won in a landslide victory. He wore a trench coat and a fedora almost every day to school. Always had the most absurd but oddly satisfying neck but voice when he spoke. Very matter of fact, but also tried to make jokes. But they were always incredibly dry. The kid was super smart, but just so eccentric that it pushed people away. Also, he always smelled like onions. In hindsight, most of the weird kids were just autistic, but we didn't know what that was. Jerk off in the change room while everyone was changing. Where do we start? He was ginger, chubby and had the face of a rat, so it wasn't going to be easy from the beginning for him. Then he decided at the age of 14 to tell and show everyone his nutsack that only had one ball in it, even if they said they didn't want to see it. He passed out from nicotine rush and pissed himself while trying to act cool with the smokers. He stunk, knew he stunk, and tried to rock it by smelling himself and making out it was nice. He would say creepy shit to girls as they passed in the corridor, like "Hey sexy," and then blow them a kiss. He very noticeably made girls feel awkward, and it seemed that that was his sport of sorts. The worst of it though was his drip. He would constantly, no matter the weather, have a drip of snot hanging from his hooked nose. One time he tried to pull a girl over to him with an umbrella handle like one of those pinstripe vest vaudeville dudes. I was about 11 to 12 years old and there was this kid in my class called Brandon. He was bullied by other students for being overweight, so I decided to sit next to him one day and keep him company. Let's just say he got too friendly. We were joking about and laughing and out of nowhere he looks at me dead in the eyes and lets a fart rip. It was so bad that I remember it 14 years later. I proceeded to laugh to not make him uncomfortable, but all it did is hype him even more. This dude was ripping farts for the whole day. I didn't even know it was possible to do it that many times. Pulled out his dick in front of the cheerleaders in the 4th grade. Dominance asserted. Fucking Dan. Dude would lick the bottom of people's shoes for no reason. He made himself throw up in front of other kids. He'd steal the ball other kids were playing with and run away screaming for the queen. This is in the US. He wrote an entire dissertation on why Nintendo 64 was superior to PlayStation in Sharpie on the back of the bus, got caught, and had to spend several days worth of rides scrubbing it off while the bus was in motion. That kid was me. I didn't see anything wrong with this guy, but apparently I missed the most amazingly fucked presentation of our class. First of all, this was college, with adults. Since I was spending the entire semester grinding away at the start of the week, I usually took very long weekends because I was way ahead of schedule. Nobody bothered me about it. but it bit me in the ass eventually, because I missed some legendary cringe. For Dutch class we had to do a presentation in front of the class for about 10 minutes. It could be about anything you wanted. The presentations I had seen were pretty good, and everybody in the class was supportive of each other. But then, one Friday, this guy had his turn. Legend has it, he did his presentation about some lolly anime. From what my classmates told me, he started his presentation normally. Then the title screen of his PowerPoint showed up with a bunch of lolly characters on it, and people were in stitches. The teacher tried to maintain order, but everything the guy said just had everyone laughing more. And I heard at some point he tried to defend this shit as a deep art form, and even the teacher couldn't help himself but laugh at the guy. So he grabbed his bag and left the school, leaving his laptop and other valuables just lying there. I don't know how this ended, because my internship started and I was focused on that. But I do wish I was there to see that shit and offend the guy's massive balls for talking about lolly anime for his presentation. We were in class one day, I think in grade 10 or 11. He pushed a staple into the eraser of his pencil, so it made a fork and jammed it into the plug on the side of our lab table. It made a loud crack and the power went out in ours and the next 2 classrooms down the hall. But wait. There's more. Immediately after doing this, he stood up and posed like he was riding a horse. He then asked the kid next to me to hit him in the balls with his briefcase. Yes, briefcase. He got what he wanted. One hard thud, and he was on the ground moaning. All he said when approached by the teacher was that was for me and nobody else. Then he grabbed his briefcase and walked out of class. We didn't see him again until about a month later. He was much quieter, focused on coding and shredding on his electric guitar in the hallways between classes. Weird kid in my school used to eat batteries, AAA and watch batteries, never let a dare or a bed pass, use batteries, new batteries. He didn't care, he'd swallow them. 30 years later, he's a successful businessman with 3 fine children, 1 in college. His wife is gorgeous too, and he's healthy as hell, runs miles every day. Just kidding. He's dead. He ate batteries. He recited the script from Nostalgia Critic videos word for word, except replacing names with his. He did it constantly from 6th grade to at least 10th, probably still does it. I called him out on it in 6th grade a couple weeks after he moved into the school and he hasn't talked to me since.